Hey, welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and we discuss the news and events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great to be here.
Yay. Yeah, glad to see you. Now, we had some interesting things this week, some stuff to comment on as far as events and news articles and things like that. I think maybe we start with the fact that maybe sort of putting a bow on the whole Paris org opening fiasco and David Miscavige not showing up there. It seemed that the church said, no, he was there. And now, yeah, what was this story about?
Right. So David Miscavige, as he promised to his followers, has opened 4 new ideal orgs this year. They've been overdue for years, but they finally got them open as he said he would. And the fourth of those was the Paris Ideal Org. And even before that happened on April 6th, I believe, Saturday, April 6th, we were wondering if Miscavige himself was going to go because France traditionally is not real friendly to Scientology. And we were fortunate. We had numerous people there that we knew. Alex Barnes Ross was outside the building. Pete Griffiths was there. The journalist Johnny Jacobson was there with a press badge. And they got a real good sense of what was going on outside the building. And based on what they saw, for example, Johnny saw the ribbon pull and there was no Miscavige. Based on that, they believed that Miscavige had not shown up that day. Well, and Alex had also pointed out that he checked into flight data on Tom Cruise's private jet, which these days in the age of the internet you can keep track of. And the week before, Tom had flown from England to Paris. And Alex wondered if Dave had come over to visit a week before the event rather than the day of. Okay, a couple of days after the event, Scientology put out a press release saying David Miscavige was at the event to open the Ideal Org. And they had some images of him giving a speech inside the building. But Alex was still very suspicious of that. He thought, Dave could have come over with Tom the week before, taped that, and then they're claiming that he was there on the day of, on April 6th.
Right.
And there were some circumstantial things that made us think that that might be the case. For example, everybody who showed up on the day of the grand opening, April 6th, got a certain red, white, and blue flag pin that, French colors, and then it looked like the Eiffel Tower IAS. But the people in the pictures with Miscavige, when he was giving a speech, were wearing a different kind of a pin. So that suggested, it's possible. Maybe they taped this earlier. Well, after going back through the photographs, Alex discovers something that he said was right in front of our faces the whole time. And that is where Miscavige gave the speech was the chapel of the new Ideal Org. And Scientology had posted a picture of generally what that chapel looks like. And if you zero in on the stage, it's got this kind of generic wooden background behind the podium. The day that the photos of Dave giving a speech, though, had a much different backdrop behind him. And it wasn't just a simple like green screen or something. It clearly had a 3D kind of they always go big on these things, right? It's like Gensler or something makes this thing.
Yeah.
It's got like multiple layers to it. It's got an image of the Eiffel Tower. Clearly something, fairly elaborate that they put up behind Miscavige.
Yeah.
Well, one of the people that went to the event posted photos later that day, and we had seen them that day. We knew they were posted that day. And one of the pictures was them in the chapel. None of that was there. The elaborate background wasn't there. It was the generic wooden panels and this grand piano that wasn't there when Miscavige was there. And Alex said to me, "This is the smoking gun. This is it. There's no way they got, that he gave that speech and 2 minutes later they got rid of that background." And I agree with him. I think this is pretty definitive evidence that when Dave recorded that speech with that background, it was simply a different day. Was it a week before when Tom Cruise was in Paris? We don't know. But I think we can say that they tried to pull off this fakery where Miscavige came over, recorded his speech went back to England, and then on the day of the event, he wasn't there. Well, I'm pretty sure about that now. And, people have asked, well, so what? I think it's a big deal. Don't you think it's a big deal, Chris, that this multi-billion-dollar multinational religious organization is faking having its leader at the most important event of that month of the opening of this new building in Paris, France? I think it's a big deal.
Think it's bizarre as hell. And I think for that reason, it's a big deal. Like, why the dishonesty? Why the charade? Why tell the public? Clearly, the people who were there, the Scientologists, know he wasn't there. So it's not like he's carrying out this lie for them. So who's he lying for? Who's he trying to impress? What is this? And that's the reason for me that it stands out as significant and something to just sort of bookmark, huh? Okay. Yeah. That's really weird. He wasn't there, but he wanted all of us to think he was. So I'm wide open to suggestions, by the way, if y'all want to drop in the comments as to what you think might be the reason for that, because obviously, be avoiding process servers, avoiding hostile governments like the French government to Scientology. Fine, makes all sense. But why lie? Like, is he trying? Yeah. Is this an ego thing? Oh, I'm not afraid of them. Maybe it's that stupid, but maybe there's other. Sometimes things don't occur to me. Don't know. Interesting nonetheless. Now, Priscilla Presley. Is she? Isn't she? Well, we don't. There's the Scientology question, but now there's also lawsuit. Maybe broke. What is this now?
Yeah, this kind of came out of left field. I got a source that pointed me to something. I got to break this news for the Daily Beast that Priscilla Presley is being sued by Priscilla Presley, the company, and it's based on Priscilla's in LA, but this woman that's suing her is in Orlando, Florida, and she's alleging that a couple years ago they had known each other because this woman was an auctioneer and had helped Priscilla auction off some Elvis memorabilia, so they knew each other. And Priscilla came to her and said, "Look, I need help," and that she was literally weeks away from being completely broke. And so this woman, Bridget Cruz, then it's agreed to give up her auctioning business and come work full-time for Priscilla to see if they couldn't exploit her name and image a little bit more and get some more money. And so the first thing they did was they hashed out an agreement. They created this business called Priscilla Presley something, I forget, LLC. And there's documents, they signed it. Priscilla was clearly in Florida. Bridget claims that not only did she sign this, but that she was planning to move to Florida and was looking for property and had asked Donald Trump's personal realtor to help her find someplace to live. It's all very fascinating stuff in this complaint. And what I found was that was back in December, I think I broke that news, or January, I can't remember. Yeah. And the reason I had a story about that this week was that they have filed an amended complaint. And sometimes it's a pain because you have to go through the original complaint and the new one to see line by line, what did they add? It was hard to tell. But 4 pages in, I found this one sentence that Bridget's legal team inserted, and that not only in August 2022 were they coming to Priscilla's rescue to help her because she was broke, but also because Lisa Marie was threatening to sue her. And they don't say why. They don't say why, and so that to me was like, yikes, that's kind of interesting. So just a few months before Lisa Marie died, she was supposedly threatening her mom to sue her. I think what's going on there, Chris, is it's a shot across the bow. It's like, look, if you keep fighting us so hard on this lawsuit and we get into a trial, a lot more is going to come out besides what was in this business contract.
Okay? Right.
So I think that's what they're doing. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was worth the story. And also, it always brings up for me, the other thing I wanted to learn from this Bridget woman, and I hope at some point she gives me an interview, she was super tight with Priscilla for a while, right? Really, really close. And I've talked to some people that knew them, and they say that, yes, she can tell me all kinds of things. For example, how extensive has Priscilla's involvement in Scientology been? Because remember, back in February, we talked about this story.
Yep.
where Priscilla showed up at the art show in Austria of Gottfried Helnwein,
Yeah.
who, no question, very involved, longtime Scientologist. And the reason why that's kind of interesting is that when Lisa Marie left Scientology, and we talked about it in 2015, she told me not only had she completely left Scientology, but she had told her mother, Priscilla, and her daughter, Riley Keough, "You're coming out with me." And that was also confirmed by Mike Rinder, who had talked to them on the phone, and he said Riley, no question, was telling them, "You need to bring these MFers down." So that
Yeah.
there's no question that in 2014, 2015, Lisa Marie had left Scientology and had brought Priscilla and Riley out with her. But it's 2024. I don't, what is the situation now when Lisa Marie sadly has died and Priscilla is hanging out with Gottfried Helnwein?
Exactly.
I think this woman, Bridget, may be able to explain some of that stuff. And so I'm
Yep.
hoping that she might talk. She's pretty smart not to be saying anything now. Her lawsuit's doing fairly well. The judge actually ordered an evidentiary hearing over jurisdiction. And so and that's this month. And so they're probably going to learn a few more interesting things about Priscilla at that hearing. So I don't know. I just thought, I know it's not the most Scientology involved story I've done in a while, but Priscilla historically has had this involvement. And it's interesting to see this lawsuit go through some of these developments.
Absolutely. And it does nag that, is she back in? Is she back in? With that Helnwein thing, I'm positive. I just don't see how there's any way around that, given that she's, persona grata at a high level OT VIP Scientology event. Um, do we happen to know, and I'm springing this on you, but do we happen to know about Riley?
Well, like I said, Lisa Marie told me that Riley came out with her, and then Mike had that amazing anecdote about getting on the phone with them and Riley telling Mike Rinder, "You need to bring these MFers down."
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's 2014. A few years later, I wrote a story because it had been brought to my attention that Riley was starting to post photos on her Instagram account with some Scientologist friends.
Oh,
And
did she?
that's not, absolute proof one way or the other, but it's troubling.
Yeah.
Had she decided to go back in or I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but
Hard to say.
yeah.
Hard to say. All we can really comment on is the fact that I know from personal experience, as I've said before, we know from, Marty Rathman's statements about Nicole and Tom from back in the day that they have an effective recovery line where they can bring people back in who have gone all the way out. I mean, hell, I can tell you that John Travolta got out in the 80s and they got him back in. So anything's possible. So I was just curious about that one. Okay, now you had a bit of a rant this week, which I was 1000% in agreement with. So I'm going to ask you about this because it was posted on your blog this week, and that was that this business of Valerie Haney, Valeska Paris, these people who are getting roughshod in our court system by Scientology. How are we going to see justice for these people? How are they supposed to find this, right? What comments do you have on that one?
Well, the week before, I had talked to Valerie. I hadn't heard from her in a while. Finally got to talk to her about she did 2 more days of arbitration in February. She had done 3 in October, and I was actually there outside where she was doing that and talked to her each night. And then in February, she did 2 more, but I didn't hear from her about them. And it took a little while before she finally contacted me, and we talked about them. And Scientology still wants to do more, and it's just outrageous what they're putting her through because it's nothing like independent arbitration that people might be used to. And so, I know people hear the word arbitration and they zone out, but it's really important what Scientology is doing with this legal strategy and derailing these lawsuits. And not only, and see, with the Garcias, who were the first ones that had to go through this about 6 or 7 years ago, um, it was disheartening because they brought 900 pages of evidence with them, and Scientology said, disallowed like 90% of it.
Yep.
Didn't let them have an attorney, didn't let them have a smartphone. It was just like so unfair. And then they got a token amount. It was just ridiculous. And so, you assume that Valerie's going to go through something similar. But what Valerie's going through is so much worse because they're not just disallowing evidence, they're not even hearing her case. They're
Yep.
just subjecting her to day after day of these parade of witnesses coming up and calling her a liar, digging out all these documents to go over things she did as a 15-year-old. Just to try to, I think it's just to wear her down. And it's
Yep.
abuse. It's abuse.
Yep.
And now Valeska Paris is facing the same prospect. Her judge had ruled that, yeah, you have to go through arbitration, but then the judge had allowed her to do an interlocutory appeal, or at least a petition to the 11th Circuit. The 11th Circuit said, no, you're going to have to go through the arbitration if you want to appeal the ruling. I don't know what Valeska is going to do, but I just wanted people to understand what they're facing because I get a lot of questions about arbitration and people are somewhat confused. So, for example, I just ran down a couple things. For example, people will ask me, well, how can that billion-year sealed contract be legal in court anyway? Or how can contracts people sign as children work in court? And I had to explain to them, none of that is in court. That's not what the dispute is about.
Right.
Since the 90s, every single Scientologist who does anything in the Church of Scientology, the comm course, the Purif, the student hat, auditing, employment, no matter what you do, the first thing they do is they put a waiver in front of you and say, sign this. And it has this arbitration clause that if you have any problem with the Church of Scientology, you promise not to sue them, but to go to their internal arbitration. Well, so many people I've talked to said they didn't even read the document. They didn't even know that was on there. They've been harmed. They take them to court. And then Scientology says, yeah, you signed this, though. You can't sue us. And the judge says, okay, you signed it. You got to go do arbitration. So that's one thing. It's not the billion-year contract. It's not contract signed as children. It's just that everybody signs on for anything.
Right.
So, the first thing when somebody sues, the first thing Scientology does is dive into their files to find those. That's one thing. Another thing is people ask me, well, how can Scientology not allow you to have an attorney? I mean, like California state law says in an arbitration, of course you can have an attorney. And I've even heard, Chris, I've had this question from lawyers. And I've had to explain to them, look, you guys understand, once the judge rules that the contract is there, the signature is valid, you're going to have to go to arbitration. After that point, this is a tax-exempt religious organization. The court literally can't even examine Scientology's rules. That's against their constitutional religious rights. Scientology gets to set all the rules. It's so unfair. It's disgusting. And finally we had a judge that said, this is unconscionable. It's just too unfair against the person. And Scientology found a way to get that judge's ruling killed before he could rule on it. Now, that's in the Jane Doe lawsuit, and she's appealing that, and that'll be interesting. But I just wanted people to understand some of the unfairnesses that are involved in this arbitration that Valerie's been going through and that Valeska may have to. I don't know if she's going to or not, but that's the other thing. People ask me, why do they go through it at all? And they have to understand, they can't appeal the judge's ruling until they've gone through the arbitration.
That's right.
Believe me, the Garcias didn't want to go through it. Valerie doesn't want to go through it, but they can't appeal until they've done it. And now Scientology just keeps extending Valerie's abuse day after day. I can't believe it. And I'm the only one reporting on it, Chris. That's so sad. It's so disgusting.
It's beyond the beyond. And it really is one of these things that is this dirty little secret in our legal system that just sits there as this little ticking time bomb, because Scientology is not the only people who can do this. What you described is how this separation of, the government First Amendment interpretation is, oh, well, we can't get involved in any of that. It's not a religious ritual, you jerks. This is arbitration. This is something that should be regulatable or at least inspectable by a court, because you're basically taking the court's job and outsourcing it to the party who is in question as having committed, criminal civil violations. It is the most backwards world thing you can imagine. And to find out this is the world we live in is quite a harsh wake up call for a lot of people. So I understand why there's so much denial and what the hell and how could this be? Yeah, this is what we've been actually talking about for a couple of years now. And I was so happy that you took the time, in this last week or two to really break down the answers to these questions for people. And I hope they will take advantage of that because it's there to be understood. This is legal kangaroo court. This is legal authoritarian torture of former members that's sanctioned by courts of law. And that's how off the rails this is.
And I have to credit Valerie. She told me this has been very difficult for her. It's been very difficult for her emotionally, and I really feel for her. And it's just terrible the way the court is sanctioning this in America. It's insane. It's insane.
It's absolutely criminal because of the fact of the re-traumatization and the sort of purposeful, covertly hostile, if I will, torture that they are putting these women through, right? That these victims through. Yeah. On principle alone, on common sense alone, a judge should be able to see through this, to send somebody back to their tormentors to be further tormented. Anyway. So I know these guys have to be the trailblazers. I really can't express enough the gratitude and the depths of courage on display here. I know even with everything I know right now, I would have an incredibly hard time dealing with going back to Scientology and being put in a room and having to sit for 8 hours a day while they work their, cult magic on me.
5 on 1. 5
on 1. Jesus. Gross. So that's what Scientology gets up to. Now, there were 2 other things, and these are significantly lighter notes. So let's go ahead and switch over to these. First off, there is this very interesting story that popped up on your site this week that I wanted to get you to talk about, which was I used to get asked all the time, Christian Science, Scientology. What? People are so confused by this.
It's been there forever, Chris, because Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, she precedes Hubbard by decades. So whenever there was a Church of Scientology, there were always people confusing it. I'm sure you've run into that throughout your career. I've run into it throughout my time reporting, and it didn't bother me all that much. I think there's a reason why people mix them up, and it's not just the name being somewhat similar, but that at the center of Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Science is this idea that you should not get medical treatment.
That's right,
and that's led to some really, really bad things. And then in Scientology, people hear something similar. And of course, what it is that it's psychiatric medication that is completely banned in Scientology.
That's right.
But also, Hubbard was very just generally down on doctors in general, and so often, even though there's no prescription against Western medicine in Scientology, often Scientologists look for alternative treatments, sometimes put off treatments longer than they should.
Yeah.
And so that similar outlook against doctors and medication between the two, I think, also creates some confusion. The reason why I published something at all this week is that I'm just very fortunate. I've got a group of folks at the bunker who like to send stuff into me. And one of them is this wonderful guy in England named Graham. I have met him, and he lives in Oxford. And he there is no Scientology in Oxford, even though they ripped off the name and called the personality.
But Tony, the Oxford Capacity Analysis, right?
Right. That's right. But there is no Scientology in Oxford. But there is a Church of Christ scientist there, Christian Science, and so he decided to check it out, and he just wrote a little thing about it. And the observation, he stayed away from the whole medical thing. He was just making the observation how friendly they were to an outsider and kind of open and discussing things. And he felt that maybe that's why there are 69 Christian Science facilities in England compared to like 3 or 5, whatever it is, of Scientology ones. So
Yep.
it was a fun little essay, and I was glad to publish it because I got a lot of feedback from people that have, either run into that confusion or thought about it themselves. So it was just a fun piece, and it will always be there, Chris. People will always have that mix up.
Exactly. And finally, and this was just, I just laughed out loud. It was just so funny to me. So there was a American Psychiatric Association convention happening. Was in Chicago or something right now? And Scientology put out a call. What was this about?
No, it was here in New York City, and that's why I got
New York City.
That's why I got excited. Was
That's
the
funny.
APA is like the ultimate enemy to the Church of Scientology, and usually when they have their annual meeting, Scientology pulls together some big. We've seen these big demonstrations they put on with Kirstie Alley out front and Kelly Preston and all that, wearing their T-shirts "Psychiatry Kills," and so I saw that a week before, Jeffrey Pomerantz, who's like this very well-known actor in Scientology. He's not so well-known outside of Scientology. I think he was in Magnum PI or something.
That's right. He was.
But he's so well-known in Scientology because he's the voice of Scientology. When you go to events, the voiceover you hear is Jeff Pomerantz. So he's very well-known. And for the New York Ideal Org, he put out this video on Facebook about a week ago saying, we're going to have a surprise party for the APA. We're going to have thousands. Contact CCHR. Come down to the New York. Okay. So I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. Now that I am working on this other story that involves CCHR, and there was somebody I wanted to talk to, and they happened to be going to the convention. So I said, okay, I can do two things at one time. And it was, nice. I love riding my bike. I rode my bike all the way down there. And then I met my source. We had a cup of coffee and had a real nice conversation. And I said, okay, I'm going to go now and watch a protest. And I was really looking forward to it, Chris, because I would love to just get in the face of Jan Eastgate and ask her some questions. She's the president of CCHR, pretty notorious. I'm sure a lot of your readers know who she is and her background. Maybe Pomerantz will be there in his famous Scientology Works T-shirt. Maybe some celebrities. I was really looking forward to. I got my notebook. I had my phone to record people. I was ready, and I got out there in front of Javits Center. Nothing. I was there for hours. Nothing. I saw two protesters the whole time I was there. They had nothing to do with Scientology or CCHR. They were pro psychiatry. They just had some differences with it, but no Scientologists. Now that later that afternoon, or about the same time I was there, my attorney, who also lives in Manhattan, saw that they had flown a banner behind a plane saying "Psychiatry Kills, ban electroshock." So that they did shatter some suppress or shatter and suppress the whatever. I can't even know how to say it. What? Chris, help me.
They shattered the suppression that was all over the seagulls or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what happened is they probably did gather some people at the org, which is way uptown. It's Times Square, right? And they probably never even came down to Javits Center, but they probably got it. They probably had. I wish I'd thought of this. I could have cycled by the New York org to check it out, but I didn't. And they probably gathered a few people there, put a lot of pressure on them to donate money, and that was it. But they weren't at Javits Center. I even after I left, I asked my source to check a few times. She did. Nobody ever showed up. So big fail.
Well, huge fail. Let's have a big Scientology protest and goose eggs. I think that's awesome because, as you said, and certainly back in the 80s and 90s, especially, I remember the old Freedom Mags with photos of Scientology kids. Psychiatry kills, don't medicate me, this kind of stuff. And look, I'm more than happy to have rational, reasonable discussions about the over medication of children. But that ain't where Scientology is coming from. There's nothing rational or reasonable about what they're doing when it comes to psychiatry. They think psychs come from the planet Farsec from millions of years ago.
Right.
This is not a rational debate that Scientologists are offering on this topic. So, so to have them come out with goose eggs, nobody showing up, I think is such a sign of the times as far as where Scientology has gotten to and what we're really fighting against. So that was a net positive for me, and that's why I wanted to end the show on that. Tony, what you got for us coming up this week?
What's coming up this week? Oh, goodness. I don't know. I'll find something, Chris.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, let's see what happens. If there's one thing that's about Scientology, it is the gift that keeps on giving. And they just keep shooting themselves in the foot and doing all this nonsensical stuff. And the cases keep rolling forward. Do we know what the next? I've forgotten what the next step is on the Leah and JD lawsuits.
Leah got a new judge, but she's asking to be put under the judge in the Bixler case.
Yeah.
The Jane Doe case is interesting because she's appealing this dirty trick that Miscavige did to get rid of her judge.
Good.
So that'll put her case on hold for a while, but it's very interesting that she's appealing that.
Yeah.
And in the Bixler case, what we're still waiting for is a hearing. It's not for a couple more weeks. But you remember, they're still trying to change their lawsuit so that there's another victim involved and also that they're bringing the racketeering charges.
Right.
And I think it's May 29th, so we might have to wait a bit for that.
Okay.
But yeah, right now we're still just in this crazy situation where all these judges have been kicked out and Miscavige has gotten away with it. And I don't know, Chris. It's just insane.
It really is. Playing every card they've got. I mean, they're not. Look, all that money doesn't buy stupid lawyers. We know that we know they shop at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to getting the PIs and the corrupt ex-cops and all that. But they pay top dollar for that legal advice. And I'll tell you, in the 1990s, coming up with that contract law thing, I don't know if y'all know. Let me just throw this out there as we wrap up here today. The Office of Special Affairs has checklists. They keep tabs on when those contracts, those legal contracts that all the Scientologists sign, they literally have this documented. So they run around the Sea Org bases getting everybody to re-up and sign when they need to and this kind of thing. Even the staff contracts, those billion-year contracts don't mean shit. It's the staff contracts that are legally binding agreements. And that's what they make sure they have on file all the time for everybody. So they've been policing this since the 90s.
Yep.
They're serious about it, and that's how they get away with this crap. So, all right, folks, thanks for coming around and watching. We hope that the information provided today was entertaining, informative, and educational as always. And we will see you guys next week. Subscribe to Tony's Substack. It is right there on the screen in front of you, the address for that. Get your notifications every day. Stay in the loop. And, of course, subscribe to my channel. Bye-bye.